What I'm about to show you is literally an apocalypse. But nothing happened. The word apocalypse just means uncovering or unveiling. That's why the English translation is revelation or revealing. So next time you take off your clothes for your man, just know that you're apocalypsing your own body. This is how Revelation is structured. You've got 7 seals broken in order. The 7th one unlocks 7 trumpets. The first 4 are blown at the same time. Then 5, 6, 7. That unlocks 7 vials of wrath. Here's what the symbolism of the seals, trumpets, and vials in Revelation refer to. Seals represent controversial mysteries. That's why they're sealed up. Trumpets represent blatant warnings. That's why it's a trumpet. And that represents 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are never called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. They just show up in order. They're riders riding different colored horses. White, red, black. And this one's usually translated pale, but the word chloros actually means green. Instead of calling it the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, I think we should call it the 4 powers of the satanic conspiracy, because these all work together and they unfold over time. First, you've got the White Rider in the year 300. That's Constantine the Great. He establishes the papacy, which is satanic. It's about spiritual world conquest. Then you've got, in the year 800, Charlemagne the Great, who conquers Europe and has the military world conquest with the establishment of the cardinal system. They always wear red. The papacy always wears white. Jesuits always wear black. They control the economic and intellectual around the year 1500 or whenever they were created around that time. The 4th one is more mysterious. We're going to get into that because that's actually a current day thing. The rise of the green priesthood that is about population reduction and earth worship. We're going to explain that next. So the 4th horseman is green. Chloros means green. You can look that up yourself. That's a Greek word. The word chlorine comes from that word because chlorine is bright green if it's in a super concentrated form. You can Google that too. 3 other times the word chloros is used in the New Testament. Each time it's for something very clearly green, like grass and trees. So that is written, the rider is called Death, and he can kill 1/4 of the world population. Now, the green priesthood that we are seeing today is obsessed with what? Population reduction. We're talking about Bill Gates. We're talking about the people who want the world's population numbers to go down. That's death. That's purging. That's genocide. They are preaching it as a gospel of today, that we should have massive death in order to have world salvation. That's the 4th rider.
This guy is Constantine the Great. He was a Roman general around the year 300. He believed he saw a vision in the sky of a cross that said underneath, "With this sign you will conquer." Now, that conquest led him to take over the pagan temples in Rome and put the sign of the cross in them. And he believed he was a Christian, although he never heard the gospel and was never properly evangelized. Instead, he believed the cross was the symbol of some new god he had encountered, and he had to be told later that it was Christian symbolism. But for the Romans, the symbol of the cross was not Christian symbolism. It was a symbol of Roman power to crucify people who disobeyed them. So he essentially crucified the pagan gods with the cross, and that's how the Catholic Church was born.
This guy is Charlemagne the Great. He created what was known as the Holy Roman Empire by conquering a bunch of territory on behalf of the Pope. Now, the way that happened was interesting because the Pope came to him desperate, running for his life, and saying that God had shown him that Charlemagne the Great was chosen to be Charles, the most serene Augustus, crowned by God, great and pacific emperor, governing the Roman Empire. That was what this dude called himself. Can you believe that? This dude got tricked by the Pope into conquering the known world. This led to an extremely dark age. It's called the Dark Ages. This is Ignatius Loyola. He was a Spanish nobleman during the time of the Inquisition. During the 1500s, there was a lot of interesting stuff going on in Europe. The Age of Sail had brought in a lot of mysticism and forbidden knowledge that the Inquisition was struggling to keep a lid on. Ignatius Loyola belonged to a Spanish secret society known as Los Alumbrados, which translates into the Illuminated. Los Alumbrados was obsessed with sex, magic, and the forbidden knowledge of the Kabbalah. During one battle, Ignatius Loyola was hit by a cannonball in the leg. That's when the Inquisition found him and asked him about his secret society. He demanded to see the Pope, and during the visit with the Pope, he agreed to use all of the resources of Los Alumbrados to help the Vatican against the Protestants in the coming movement. The Pope agreed, and he created the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits. They helped torture, kill, and rob millions of innocent Christians who were questioning the Pope.
God. They're killing us down there. They're killing us on Earth. They don't care anymore. They're just doing it. Yeah, hey, welcome to heaven. You're gonna have to wait over there under that giant altar for a while. And welcome to heaven. And you get to have this nice white robe while you wait. And while you're waiting, all of the rest of the brothers and sisters back on Earth that are being killed, they're gonna have to finish being killed before I'm gonna do anything about the whole killing the church situation. And that's the fifth seal of Revelation.
The sixth seal of Revelation is one of my favorites. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but a bunch of scary stuff starts to happen, and then all of the world's elite go and hide under mountains. Now, if you're not aware, this is literally what billionaires are doing today. Look at that. They have 5,000 person shelters. These bunkers have escape tunnels, hidden doors, bulletproof glass, and pepper spray portals to ward off intruders in case you want to get in. Oh, that's just one or two people. No, how about 50% of Silicon Valley billionaires have already purchased some kind of apocalypse insurance like a safe room bunker or overseas escape? The reason I refer to the sixth seal as the prank apocalypse is because people pay attention to the fact that it says the great day of their wrath is come and who is able to stand. But what they don't pay attention to is, that's just what these evil people say. God doesn't say it. So let's recap a little bit. The seals are controversial mysteries. They start with the four powers of the satanic conspiracy. These powers have corresponding colors and powers that are described, and they all relate back to the Catholic Church. But it's not just the Catholic Church. It's a worldwide conspiracy that they're just sort of at the heart of, and they can kickstart the whole thing. Then, after death, the green priesthood that we're seeing today with the New World Order, earth worship, death cult, then you have the confusion of the martyrs, which is all about the martyrs being in heaven, not understanding why God isn't taking vengeance, because people believe in a rapture, but there's not going to be a rapture for us. That comes later on. Then God starts to terrorize the evil people, and they hide under the mountains, but it's not actually the day of judgment yet. We'll get to these guys next. After the satanic conspiracy has killed the church and reached its full power, God wants to avenge them and judge the earth. But before he can do that, he needs to set apart a certain remnant of Israel so that he can have them be witnesses to what happens on earth as the judgments start to happen. Meanwhile, in heaven, we see all of the martyrs, a great multitude from every nation, praising God. So even when we die, it's not going to be that sad. And if you're not sure about that, an angel actually tells John that they are the ones that came out of great tribulation. Those 144,000 Israelites become sort of the new characters, the new protagonists of the story after the church is killed. We're up in heaven, but they're back down on earth, specially protected from a lot of the craziest punishments the rest of humanity are going to have to suffer. The seventh seal actually unlocks the trumpets. The 7 trumpets are only handed out after the seventh seal is broken, which means you can't interchange any of the trumpets with the seals like most Bible teachers try to do. I wish Bible scholars would pay attention to the fact that trumpets are different than seals. Seals are about hiding information, protecting them. It's a wax signet to show that something's official, but also hidden. And a trumpet is about blatantly warning the world. Okay, so let's talk about the Golden Censor event. The first 4 trumpets all revolve around the same event. The 7th seal unlocks the trumpets. Angels get the trumpets in order to warn the world what's going to happen because they killed the church. So an angel goes to the altar. Remember that the martyrs were placed under the altar in the fifth seal already. Those martyrs, if you remember, wanted God to avenge them and destroy the evil on the earth. Now, that golden censer is filled up with the incense of their prayers. The angel then takes that censer filled with that vengeful prayer and throws it to the earth. Next, we're going to talk about how that directly leads into the 7 trumpet events, because it's major foreshadowing. The first 4 trumpets all describe a planet-killer meteor impact, and I'll show you why. First, there's hailfire, blood, and burning stuff coming down, scattering across the atmosphere, and burning up all the grass. Then you have a burning mountain that falls into the sea. Then a star that hits the land and the springs. And then the sun, moon, and stars are all darkened. But there's something very interesting that they all have in common. All of them only affect 1/3 of the earth. Now, why would that happen? That's because a meteor stream only moves in one direction, and the earth is a sphere. So when it hits, it can only hit 1/3 of the earth, because everything that would try to hit the rest of the earth would pass by or deflect off or not really impact it. And yes, the evidence is only going to pile up from here. Governments around the world are spending billions of dollars to try to stop planet-killer asteroids from hitting Earth. They think they can blow them up in outer space or nudge them off course so that they won't actually make an impact. They're bragging about how they won't be affected. The Armageddon-style asteroid impact will never happen. That amazing technology explains why the golden censer, the planet-killer meteor, actually gets fragmented, and it arrives by the time it hits Earth as hailfire, as a split in parts. One goes into the sea, one goes into the land. You can picture the movie in your head celebrating that they diverted the planet killer and absorbed the impact into the sea and all of that good stuff. But it was all part of prophecy thousands of years ago, and God knew that that's what they would do, so he put it in the book. It's crazier from here. Share it! Now let's focus in on the fact that the sun, moon, and stars are all darkened for 1/3 of the day. Why does that happen? Because when 1/3 of the sky is filled up with smoke and water vapor, it can't shine. Now let's use some simple logic. 24 divided by 3 is 8. 8 time zones is about that length. It's 1/3 of the Earth. The question is, where does that meteor hit? You'll find out soon. The 5th, 6th, and 7th trumpets are called the Three Woes. An eagle, which clearly represents a heavenly messenger, cries out in heaven to the inhabitants of the earth, telling them, "Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth." He says it 3 times because the other 3 trumpets are about to sound, about to blow. So the 5th angel is actually the first woe. John specifically reminds people that he saw a star that had fallen to the earth from the sky. Star is given the key to the bottomless pit. Smoke comes out of the bottomless pit as if a furnace. It darkens the sun and the air, just like we said. Locusts come out of the smoke and torment the people on earth. But only those who do not have that mark in their forehead, which is the 144,000 Israelites we mentioned earlier, will be tortured for 5 months, and they'll want to die, but they won't be allowed. Now, I have to reply to this comment. I don't want to insult the guy. I don't want to create a stumbling block for him. But this is the reason why I go interpretation from the ground up. I don't use any tradition terms. I just look at what the Bible actually says. All right, I'm going to go over the 5th seal of Revelation with no jokes and just explain it properly. So John sees a bunch of martyrs underneath an altar, not on top of it, not as a sacrifice, but underneath, almost like kindling. And they're confused. They don't understand why God isn't avenging them yet. And instead of telling them that he's going to avenge them, they're just given white robes. They're told to wait there. And they're specifically told to wait there until their brothers and sisters who were being killed are going to finish being killed. This verse kind of debunks the idea of the rapture, or at least the idea that the rapture is something that saves the church from tribulation. There's a very good point later on where the rapture will happen to the 144,000 Israelites, not the church today, if we go into tribulation. Second woe, or sixth trumpet, gives us our first major hint about where the meteor is going to impact. 4 angels are in the river Euphrates, and they have the power to kill a third of mankind. There we go with the third again. And even though a third of the world is killed, those who are not killed are going to keep on worshiping demons. They're guilty of murder, theft, sexual immorality, sorcery, or drug use. The Euphrates River goes up from Turkey down all the way to the Persian Gulf through Iraq. Biblically, the Euphrates River is very important, and so is Baghdad because it used to be Babylon. The Mesopotamian floodplain leading up to the Persian Gulf is where human life began. Don't believe that? Go back to Genesis 2. You'll see the river Euphrates with Eden. The meteor turns this river toxic. And of course, Israel is right over there, along with the Mediterranean Sea. Now the sixth trumpet keeps going. It's one of the longest events in Revelation. A mighty angel comes down out of heaven, a body of cloud, a rainbow around the head, a face like the sun, and feet like pillars of fire. He places his right foot on the sea and his left foot upon the earth. Now let's draw that. Now look at this. We've got 2 pillars of the legs going up like fiery pillars to a body of cloud that then has a sun with a rainbow around it. It's literally an image of the meteor impacts. One landed, the right one, the first one landed in the sea, remember? The second one landed on the land and was opening up the bottomless pit where all the smoke was coming from. This angel, even though it's a real angel, is clothed and manifested as the meteor impact itself to stand as a warning. So we've got our mighty angel looking sort of like that, with 1 foot on the sea and 1 foot on the land. But which sea is that? We've already deduced that the 1 foot on the land is probably around Turkey, because it makes the whole river toxic and this whole floodplain. So we've got the Black Sea, we've got the Mediterranean Sea, the Caspian Sea, and then down here we have the Red Sea. I think it's going to hit the Mediterranean Sea, and I'll tell you why. Because Israel is right there. And what that means is that that meteor, that golden censer that was thrown by the angel from heaven, was going to hit Israel, except it got fragmented on course and ended up splitting up, one hitting Turkey and one landing in the Mediterranean Sea. And now this quote-unquote angel, which is a real angel, will be standing straddled over this whole area, looking over Israel. You'll see why God would target Israel and why the Mediterranean Sea is so important coming up soon. The mighty angel roars like a lion. Then 7 thunders sound their voices. John is trying to write down what they're saying, but a voice from heaven tells him to seal up what they said and not write it down. The angel then says that there's going to be no more delay. In the days of the voice of the 7th angel, when he sounds his trumpet, that's when the mystery of God is going to be completed, like he proclaimed to his servants, the prophets. John is then told to go and take the little scroll from the mighty angel and eat it. And it ends up making his stomach bitter, but it tastes nice in his mouth at first. Then immediately he's told it's necessary for him to prophesy in front of many tongues and nations and peoples and kings. This immediately leads to John being given a measuring stick. He has to measure the temple of God in Israel, the altar, and those worshiping in it. So Israel just dodged the biggest bullet in human history, and now the angel that's produced by that wants John to measure those in the temple there. Something's wrong here. Now let's think about Israel from John's point of view. At the time when John is writing Revelation, the temple is already destroyed by Rome. And so in the future, when he sees that there are people worshiping in the temple and there's an altar, he's initially happy. That's why the little book tastes sweet in his mouth at first. But then when he thinks about it, he realizes that doesn't add up. That's not good. John worships Jesus, and he knows that Jesus said that they should destroy the temple and that in 3 days he would raise it up. And he even explains that this refers to Jesus himself when he's resurrected. Christians are never supposed to sacrifice anymore. Jesus took away any need for more sacrifices. We also don't have a holy city. Hebrews 13 says, "For we have no permanent city, but we seek the one to come. Therefore, through him, let us continually offer up sacrifice of praise to God, that is the fruit of our lips confessing his name. So whoever's worshiping in this temple, it ain't Christians. That's bitter. I think the two witnesses might be John and Ezekiel, and I'll tell you why. In Ezekiel chapter 3, he's forced to eat a scroll, and it tastes sweet as honey in his mouth, but then when he has to go do the job, he feels bitter, and it specifically uses that word. He realizes that he has to go and judge Israel and possibly condemn many of them if they don't listen to him. And John is maybe forced into that same situation. I find it very odd that John happens to become a character in the story at this exact moment when Israel enters the scene and we start to see the temple. He has to measure the people inside immediately before we see the two witnesses come onto the scene. And the angel just told John that he had to prophesy in front of many people and kings and nations, but John never actually did that after he wrote the book of Revelation. The only time to do it would be in the events of Revelation, but he wouldn't know that he is that person in the story. We are still in the sixth trumpet here, also called the second woe. And this is all leading up to something. It all ends up coming towards Israel. But there's a very troubling undertone here where Israel doesn't seem to actually be holy anymore. There's something wrong with it. And these two witnesses are coming to witness against Israel and to show them that they need to turn away from evil, it seems like. You might not believe that, but we're going to make the argument as we go forward here. The two witnesses are killed by the beast, which comes up out of that bottomless pit to make war with them. But look at this. Their bodies will be in the street of the great city, which is spiritually called Sodom and Egypt, where also their Lord was crucified. There is only one city in the world where the Lord was crucified, and that is Jerusalem. If you haven't figured it out yet, it seems like Jerusalem has made a deal with the devil. This leads up to the biggest turning point in Revelation. I think there's an alliance between Jerusalem and the beast by the time the two witnesses come in Revelation. This explains why the beast comes there to stop the two witnesses on their behalf. Nobody likes those two witnesses. They all celebrate afterwards. We'll look at that. After they're dead, it says, "Those dwelling on the earth rejoice over them and make merry and send gifts because those two prophets have tormented those dwelling on the earth." Now, since Jerusalem isn't relying on God for salvation, and in fact is killing God's prophets, that just shows you how evil Jerusalem has become at this future point, right? But the Jerusalem people don't do it themselves. They let the beast handle the dirty work. And the whole mystery of why Jerusalem would ever team up with the beast is what explains the coming chapters that people get so mixed up. You're supposed to be thinking, why would the beast team up with Israel? After 3.5 days, the Spirit of God enters back into those two witnesses, and they stand up. Everyone becomes terrified who looks at that, and they hear the voice saying, "Come up here," and those two witnesses go up to heaven in a cloud, and the enemies beheld them. Now here's the critical part. A great earthquake comes. That earthquake causes 1/10 of Jerusalem to crumble. And after 7,000 men are killed in that earthquake, the rest became terrified and gave glory to the God of heaven. This is the climax that leads to the second woe passing. The fact that Jerusalem is now giving glory to God is the climax. That is the most important thing that everything else has been leading up to. It's easy to miss just how epic the struggle to recapture Jerusalem has been. But when you realize that the meteor coming down, the death, the third of the world being destroyed essentially, and Israel being at the center of it, looking at it all, then you realize that it's not just about this earthquake that destroys 1/10 of Jerusalem. We've had the two witnesses. They were doing plagues. We had the beast coming and killing them, and then God giving them life again. This is a movie. This is an epic story. Books should be written about how this plays out. After the beast seemingly succeeds in killing the two witnesses, God has the last laugh. He brings them up, and then an earthquake comes and destroys part of Jerusalem, killing 7,000 of them. And 7,000 is a tiny number, but depending on who those people are, it could send a powerful message to the rest. What if it's the Jerusalem government or something like that? So now we see that the second woe is the recapture of Jerusalem. The inhabitants of Jerusalem have just started giving glory to the God of heaven, and now we're told that the third woe is coming quickly. So the seventh angel sounds his trumpet, and those in heaven start singing this song about how the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of the Lord and Christ. And this is directly connected with the fact that Jerusalem was just recaptured by God, implying that Jerusalem was sort of the capital city of the New World Order at that time. Recapturing Jerusalem is the same as the kingdoms of this world becoming that of the Christ. The people in heaven are happy because God has finally begun to reign on the earth. And remember that this mighty angel said that all the mysteries would be fulfilled in the age of the seventh trumpet. The seventh trumpet is the third woe. It unlocks these 7 vials of wrath. Once you realize that Satan has deceived Jerusalem into becoming the capital of the New World Order, then it makes perfect sense why, after Jesus recaptures Jerusalem from Satan, he decides to give them a big history lesson. This history lesson is literally displayed in heaven as a great wonder that they can all see on earth. In other words, Revelation 12 is not a time skip to a different place, but a continuation of the same timeline following exactly what just barely happened. Jerusalem was recaptured by Jesus, and now they're the ones being shown the history of how Jerusalem got to where it is. And so begins this history lesson of the Christian church, the woman crowned with 12 stars, about to deliver a baby. God wants these freshly converted people in Jerusalem to understand that the church was right all along. And he's also going to expose the true nature of the beast that they've been sleeping with. So now we've got the famous history lesson that the woman, clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and the crown of 12 stars, she's pregnant and she's about to deliver a baby. And the great red dragon, with all the heads and horns and crowns, comes and throws a third of the stars, meaning angels, to the earth, and he tries to eat the baby as soon as it's born. The baby, Jesus, was supposed to rule all nations with a rod of iron, but in his death he got caught up to God's throne in his resurrection. So the woman flees into the wilderness. Then we have that famous war in heaven everyone likes to talk about. Here we see clearly that the great dragon is none other than Satan, the devil who deceives the whole world. But Satan's not cast into hell, he's cast into the earth, and his angels join him. This expulsion of Satan and his angels is what brings in the kingdom and gives it power and strength, because Satan is cast to earth and can't accuse them anymore in heaven. 3 times in the same discourse, Jesus describes the ruler of this world as a fundamentally evil being who has nothing to do with him. It's in the book of John. It says, "Now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world, Satan, shall be cast out." Cast out of where? "I will no longer speak many things with you, for the ruler of this world is coming, and he has nothing in me. And when he, the Holy Spirit, comes, I will convict the world of sin and of righteousness and of judgment. Of sin, because they do not believe in me. Of righteousness, because I am going to my Father, and that you see me no more. Of judgment, because the ruler of this world has been judged." He's describing the war in heaven, the fact that Satan is going to be cast out of heaven and sent to earth. He's coming. And he's going to be the ruler of this satanic world after Jesus leaves. I want to make this point crystal clear. If you're a Christian and you believe the Bible, you are a conspiracy theorist. That's part of your religion. Jesus said that the ruler of this world is evil and it hates the church. So preach that. It's very important to understand that the war in heaven happens during the lifetime of Jesus or shortly thereafter. It's not something that happened in the Garden of Eden or before creation. John Milton's Paradise Lost does not have it correct. Jesus even talks about this in the book of Matthew. He says that from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. And again in the book of Luke, Jesus says that he beheld Satan having fallen as lightning out of heaven. Satan had been in heaven, accusing the brethren day and night before God. His expulsion is what brings in salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our God and the power of Christ. We're talking about a very real metaphysical war that happened. That's why it says, "Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea," because the devil's come down onto you and he's angry. But it also means saints can go up to heaven and rejoice. As our history lesson goes on, we see that Satan is persecuting the church. The church ends up hiding underground. We know that the woman is the church because her children have the testimony of Jesus Christ. And now we're getting the history lesson about the beast. The first beast comes up out of the sea, and that represents old Rome. It has a similar description as the dragon, and it has heads with the names of blasphemy on it. What's important is that Satan gives this Rome his seat and great authority and his power. As we already saw, Satan's power was the power to accuse the brethren. Rome has suffered a deadly wound, and Satan gives it enough power that it actually heals, and then the whole world starts to worship Rome. Specifically because no one understands how they could make war with him. That sea that it rises out of, that's the Mediterranean Sea. Next, we'll explain how we know that this description proves it is Rome. Back in the book of Daniel, he has a dream about 4 beasts. One is a lion, one is a bear, one is a leopard, and the 4th one is mysterious. Daniel freaks out about this, and he gets an answer from an angel that's saying that the 4 beasts are 4 kings. The 4th beast is a 4th kingdom, so not just a king, and it will be diverse from all the others and will devour the whole earth. This 4th kingdom is going to speak words against the Most High, and will even wear out the saints of the Most High. Sure enough, the beast in Revelation combines the lion, the leopard, and the bear. And the saints weren't around before Rome, but they sure were afterwards. And this satanic Roman Empire has the power to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And he has the power to have a satanic conspiracy over all the nations. As for not being able to make war with him, you can look up Pax Romana, happened in the Mediterranean. A lot of emphasis is put on how this first beast has a mouth that blasphemes against God and those who dwell in heaven. When you combine this with the fact that it has the power to kill the saints, you get a picture of an organization, an empire, that just freely blasphemes against the saints and then kills them. That's exactly what Rome and the Catholic Church have been doing ever since. You can look up Nero, the emperor, who was famous for persecuting the Christians. And even though Constantine supposedly legalized Christianity, that wasn't actually true. It was just a ploy to get Christians to come out of hiding because they had been hiding in the catacombs under Rome. The real Christian church literally dug out the catacombs underneath Rome so that they could hide there. It was literally an underground church. I actually believe that's why it says that the earth helped the woman and opened her mouth and swallowed up that flood that Satan cast out after them. Flood of persecution. Revelation is the most amazing document ever written. You would think that if you're writing a prophecy, it would start off really detailed, and then towards the end, it would become vague because you would have less specific ideas of what might happen in the future. But Revelation is the opposite. It actually becomes more and more detailed as it goes on. The first 4 seals say almost nothing, although they make sense in hindsight. And then thousands of years later, we can see what it meant. But then by Revelation 8, it's specifically saying that there's silence in heaven for half an hour. It's like God takes the speed dial and slows it way down as it's about to get finished. And I think John doesn't realize that that's happening. John and the early church, they think it could happen anytime because Jesus said it could happen anytime. Some people say John made up Revelation out of his own beliefs and expectations, but there's a point where he's literally told, you're not allowed to write this thing you're about to. In case you thought there was only one beast, that's wrong. Here's the second one. This one has a different origin. It actually comes up out of the earth. It has 2 horns like a lamb, or like the church, like Jesus, but it speaks like a dragon, or Satan. So already we know that this beast has a Christian appearance, but is actually speaking satanically and blaspheming. It has all the power of the first beast, which was before him, and it causes everyone in the earth to worship the first beast, whose wound was healed. And here's how to visualize that. The 2 horns are the Catholic and Orthodox. The mouth is still satanic. They try to appear to be Christian, but they actually hate true Christianity and the Bible. Remember that Constantine the Great created both the Catholic Church and the Orthodox. Both Catholic and Orthodox always go back to Rome and give glory to it. I want to point out this comment. If you want to be blessed by God, just read Revelation and keep it in your mind. Revelation 1:3 says that you're blessed just from reading it and just from keeping it in your heart and in your mind. Take advantage of that. What does it mean that the second beast came up out of the earth? Well, unlike old Rome, which used the Mediterranean Sea to go around Europe and to capture all these slaves and bring them back to Rome, Charlemagne the Great used giant land armies to conquer Europe. It was a land-based empire. You've got the Crusades, you've got all that land conquest that they did. The papal states, the territory that they conquered through battles and war, that's the heart and that's the power source of the Vatican, the second beast. Yes, this version of the history lesson is lining up with the first one that we saw. The second beast aligns with the Red Rider, which was the military world conquest of Charlemagne. It's war. But this starts to change around the 1500s with the Black Rider. What does it mean that the second beast does great wonders? How does it make fire come down from heaven on earth in the sight of men? It says that it deceives them that dwell on earth by the means of those miracles, which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. To understand this, you really have to know your history of the Catholic Church. This really blew my mind. I had no idea until I read this book, which teaches about the miracle of the sun, that tens of thousands of people, all of them Catholic pilgrims, would see a ball of fire fall upon and destroy them, and then seemingly disappear as soon as it hit the ground. This only happens in the sight of men. Fire doesn't actually come down. It's a satanic delusion. Because it only happens when die-hard Catholics are gathered together, that's what it means, that it had power to do it in the sight of the beast. Research it yourself. What does it mean that the second beast tells the people of the earth to make an image to the first beast? You know that the first beast is old Rome, and what does it mean that he had the power to give life to that image that they create? That image is going to be able to seemingly speak. It will cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. The word should there is actually very important. That represents condemnation, not necessarily that every single person literally gets killed who doesn't worship the image. So if the second beast is the Vatican and the Orthodox, how did they tell people to create an image? And if people did create an image, how did they give it life and make it seem like it was speaking? And why would the image be a reference to the first beast, which was old Rome? This is one of my favorite parts of Revelation. So many things are going to come together in the next video when I explain this, including this thing right here. Let's talk about the image of the beast. The image is a recreation of the first beast, which had the wound by a sword and miraculously lived when Satan gave it his power. That recreation of Rome is none other than the Renaissance. The word Renaissance literally means rebirth or revival. The Italian Renaissance was specifically a revival of Roman and Greek philosophies, along with a rebirth of Latin as a language. It began in the 14th century in Florence, Italy. In case you didn't realize it, Rome is part of Italy. So the Italian Renaissance is actually a Roman revival, or more specifically, a Greco-Roman revival. All those famous Renaissance artists and sculptors, they were just trying to recreate what already existed back in old Rome. This explains so many things you don't even know, especially when you realize that the intellectual basis for it all was humanism, belief that you don't need God to live. Once it sinks in that the image of the beast is the Roman Renaissance, and that the basis of the Renaissance was humanism, and that humanism is the belief that God doesn't matter. What we're actually talking about is the birth of atheism. And most people don't even realize that for all of human history, no government was ever atheist. Every government always, including ancient Rome and ancient Greece, believed that there were gods and that the gods chose leaders, chose kings. The Renaissance is the first time, and the Enlightenment that it brought around is the first time that atheism becomes a state religion itself. Remember, it was the second beast that said they should make that image. The second beast was secretly creating atheism. This is why the Catholic Church had no problem being so corrupt and doing so much evil in the name of Jesus. The only reason why Christianity didn't die permanently with the Italian Renaissance is because the Protestant Reformation happened at the same time. If it wasn't for the fact that the Bible was translated and the average person who has no power in this conspiracy just so happened to start getting their hands on the truth of God's word, Christianity would have been finished. The plan was to introduce atheism and the Enlightenment to kill Christianity. The job of the Catholic Church was to do such a horrible job in the name of Jesus that nobody would ever want to be a Christian again. The Inquisitions, the tortures, the Crusades, everything was about undermining the true church and the true faith. Instead of reforming when they learned the truth from the Bible, they went even harder and created the Counter-Reformation. The Jesuits were the leaders of that. Remember, they're the rider of the black horse. Now I'm going to bring some stuff back full circle for you. In part 10 of my videos, I talked about this guy, Ignatius Loyola. You might remember me saying that he was a member of Los Alumbrados, and that that's Spanish for the Illuminated. They are the precursors to the Illuminati, which was created 200 years later. But both Illuminati and Los Alumbrados played their part in the conspiracy to create enlightenment. The Enlightenment is all about trusting mankind's wisdom and Gnosticism instead of God and the scriptures. This is where Freemasonry comes from. This is where all of the conspiracies that led to our current day came from. And if it hadn't been for the Protestant Reformation, we would all be Gnostics, because we wouldn't have the Bible to tell us the truth. The Jesuits created the Freemasons. They created Zionism. They created all of these red herrings for us to get distracted with. They hate the Bible more than anything. One of the most important realizations when you understand the image of the beast is that we're in the image of the beast today. We live in democracies. We live in republics. Plato was writing about that thousands of years ago. In ancient Greece, Rome was a republic. The Enlightenment and the Renaissance was about destroying Protestant monarchies and replacing them with democratic republics, which their intellectuals, like the Jesuits, could then go and manipulate and control. It's even in the art. Look at this ancient Greek temple, and then look at the White House. Here's the capital of Texas. Arizona, does that look familiar? California, am I in Rome or in America? Look, a dome with a statue on top. It must be ancient Greece. Oh wait, it's Montana. Good old Wisconsin, or is it ancient Greece? Go read Plato's Republic and you'll see a blueprint for our current society. We're talking about the Great Reset anyway, check this out. Good work, people. Since the lockdown, everything's going green. Less driving, less commuting, less flying, less consuming. Create the reset. We are talking about the green priesthood. Green, green, green. Death, death, death. So the history lesson in the sky continues. The newly converted Jerusalem is being taught the truth about Jesus and the history of the church and Satan's empire. In Revelation 13, they're learning about the beast system, which is the Roman Empire. Every time Rome is about to collapse, it evolves and changes into something else. The Italian Renaissance is the image. And it leads to our modern society where anyone who doesn't create a democratic republic is liberated, or in other words, they're demonized to the point where they get invaded and the leaders are killed. It is this secular humanist idea of old Rome that creates the mark. You see, the image, causes everyone who's great and small to receive that mark, either in their right hand or in their forehead. If you're excited to learn the truth about the mark, make sure you follow, because this is incredible stuff. I promise you've never heard this explanation before. Now let's get into the mark of the image of the beast. Yes, it is better to say that it is the mark of the image of the beast, not just the beast. There have been multiple beasts. Each one is a different phase of Rome's satanic empire on earth. The Renaissance, which was based in humanism, is the image that we're talking about. And it's the one that creates that mark. Keep that humanism in mind. We need wisdom to calculate that number. Number of the beast is man's number, and his number is 666. Go back to Genesis 1, and on the sixth day, God made all the living creatures, and especially humankind in his own image. Man's number is 6. The number for this satanic mark is 6, 3 times repeated. Remember that the Renaissance of Rome was humanism, the belief that God doesn't matter and man is the only thing that matters. Mark of the beast was and still is humanism, or as it now became, atheism. More in the next video. I've explained that the mark of the beast is atheism/humanism. A simple way to remember is that 6 is the number of mankind, and so 6, 3 times repeated, is only man with no room for God. But what does that have to do with the forehead and the right hand? Well, in Jewish and biblical thought, your forehead and your right hand already have symbolic meaning. Your forehead is your thoughts, your consciousness, your ideologies that you consciously are aware of, while your right hand is your power, your strength, what you do, your actions. So if you think or act as a humanist, as someone who doesn't believe in God, you have the mark of the beast. And while this is very important for you and me and individuals, this is also being applied on a national level, specifically with governments and kingdoms. Remember the French Revolution and these atheist, Freemason-driven bloody coups to kill anyone who didn't accept the humanist, rationalist view of the world. Satan wants the world to reject God. Now you might say, what about buying and selling? It says that people can't buy or sell unless they have the beast mark. Well, since we're mostly talking about an international, global conspiracy to control nations, not just individuals, then buying and selling at a national level means something different. Great and small, rich and poor, everybody has to submit to the international banking cartel. Do you remember Muammar Gaddafi? He was a world leader, but he got brutally assassinated and dragged through the streets because he wanted to create a gold-backed currency that was free from the banking system around the world. The Bible is describing a transformation of the world from a God-based economy to a godless banking conspiracy. Go read War is a Racket by Smedley Butler. He was a U.S. general. He describes how banks rule the world and wage war. International trade, tariffs, GDP, all of it ties in. That's our modern world. Yes, there are a dozen different ways that the satanic conspiracy of today is trying to create a mark of the beast that is more literal and personal, and we should reject those. But no microchip can affect your soul. The real mark is godlessness. Protect yourself from that first. Explaining the mark of the beast concludes the heavenly history lesson being given to Jerusalem. The first 6 trumpets successfully converted Jerusalem back to God from the satanic conspiracy. Why the very next thing that happens is that the Lamb, Jesus, goes to Mount Zion. Look who joins him, the 144,000, having the name of Jesus and his Father written in their foreheads. Heaven celebrates, and these 144,000 learn a new song that no one else is allowed to learn. Described as virgins, and they're said to follow the Lamb, Jesus, wherever he shall go. That's very important. And an angel flies to every single part of the world to preach the gospel, specifically warning them that the judgment is about to come, emphasizing that God is the one who made heaven and the waters and the sea and the earth. That message directly contradicts atheism and humanism. The satanic world gets one last chance to turn to God. Now look at this. Another angel shows up and says that Babylon has fallen, that great city. We heard about the great city before. It was referring to Jerusalem, which was called spiritually Sodom and Egypt. Now it's called Babylon. She made all nations drink the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Throughout the Old Testament, Jerusalem was always compared to a wife. It's supposed to remain pure. It's not supposed to fornicate with any other nations or kings or try to become something successful without God. Faithfulness is the term. As we already saw, Jerusalem made a deal with the devil. They made a deal with the beast. They killed the 2 witnesses. They killed the prophets who were coming to try to warn them. So even though Jerusalem has been converted back to God, what's happening spiritually is that Babylon is falling. The New World Order conspiracy has lost its capital city. Jesus now is there and he is going to control it. This kicks the world into Armageddon mode. Literally, we're going to see Armageddon. Now a third angel shows up after those first 2. It's at this point that humanity is finally warned that if anyone worships the beast, which we know is Rome, or his image, which is the Renaissance humanist modern society, or they take the mark, which is atheism, in their forehead or in their hand, meaning their beliefs or their actions, those people will now drink the wine of God's anger, his wrath. These people at the end of days will be tortured with fire and sulfur. Because they're literally hearing it from angels, they have no excuse. That's why they will be tortured forever, because they have just straight up rejected God's last offer for hope and salvation, and they still stay with that atheism or that mark. It's going to be very rough for those people who choose God, but they have to endure. Because guess what? They're all going to be killed. That's why it says, from now on, they're going to be blessed who die in the Lord. Those who choose God will be killed here. The Bible is telling them that's okay. Amen. What are your biggest questions about Revelation? Go ahead and stitch this. I had so many questions. I did years of research, and I ended up writing a book. It's called Maybe Everyone is Wrong, Revelations, Conspiracy, and the Kingdom of Heaven. I say maybe everyone is wrong. I am considering myself in that. Check it out. The question is, who are the elders from Revelation? I think this one is actually kind of simple. Logically, an elder is somebody who was there before you, who did it first, who we should all be giving respect to. And more importantly, who God considers to be the elders. And to find that out, you just have to go to the end of Revelation. Revelation 21 verses 12 to 14, when New Jerusalem is being described, the eternal city of God. There are 12 gates that have the names of the children of Israel, and then it says there are 12 foundations for the city, which are named after the 12 apostles. That adds up to 24, which is exactly how many elders there are. I can't think of a better example of elders than those people. Obviously, more importantly, God wants to eternally commend them and respect them by naming the gates and the foundations after them. The fact that even though we don't consider all of those disciples and tribes to be that special necessarily, that doesn't matter if God is the one who says, yes, you will be honored forever. This question is about whether the 7 years of tribulation is literal. First of all, it never says there are 7 years of tribulation. That's totally made up by people. The 1,260 days that the woman hides in the wilderness and the 1,260 days of the beast having power, that's within the context of this vision in the sky in the future that Jerusalem is going to get, that teaches them the church history. But we already know that history, so we don't have to worry about what those dates mean or the symbolism, because we just know it from real history. When John was writing that, it hadn't happened yet. But in hindsight, it just makes sense. Just like it wasn't a literal dragon and a literal woman with 12 stars around her head, it wasn't literally 1,260 days. What matters is that those two periods of time exactly match each other. So you can see that the woman was hiding for exactly as long as the beast had this power. That's interesting. And it is a kind of tribulation, but it's historic. Don't even get me started on the Daniel weeks. Okay, this question is about those locusts with the human faces. The locusts come out of the smoke that is produced by the bottomless pit. The bottomless pit is created by the meteor which hits and buries into the earth and keeps tunneling down. I strongly suspect that those locusts are real spirits that do torment people. And spiritually, John is seeing the reality of what they're like. But the people on earth will not see those spirits. They will have their blindness, their spiritual blindness. They will just think that it's the toxic smoke from the bottomless pit that is causing them to have these problems. This paralyzing, tormenting problem somehow. In fact, I think a lot of Revelation is showing us the spiritual reality, which when it actually happens, people will be able to deny that it is spiritual. So symbolism and literalism, they kind of go hand in hand, but Revelation focuses more on the spiritual, symbolic side. I hope that makes sense. We are living at the release of the fourth rider, the green horse ridden by death. We are seeing that as the green priesthood, what I call the green priesthood. Guys like Bill Gates and these technocrat elites who are obsessed with reducing the world population, which is just massive killing of humanity and sterilizing them, under the pretext of going green and saving the world. I also think this green priesthood is going to end up incorporating aliens and New Age spirituality and all these other things, and it's going to have this green theme to it. And the church will not survive this. We die. But that's okay. We don't need a rapture. When we die, we get blessed by God. I guess I have to remind people and show those scriptures in a different video yet. The rapture does happen, but it happens to the 144,000 Israelites later on. The church will be killed, and then the age of the 144,000 Israelites will begin. I always forget that people don't want to follow the example of the cross. Okay, I have to reply to this comment. He's saying that Jesus doesn't want a divided church. Have you read the New Testament? The epistles are all about trying to correct heresies that are coming up. Pagans are sacrificing to their old gods still, and some dude who sleeps with his own mom and thinks it's okay. And then later on in Revelation, Jesus himself comes by and warns these churches, the 7 churches. He gives them warnings and another chance to turn things around before it's too late. He's got 7 different candlesticks, 7 different churches already, and he's the one that says it. It's not one church. It's many, and they each have their own angel over them with specific challenges that are different from each other. If Jesus didn't want that, he could have done it differently. The really crazy thing is that Jesus did want it that way. He did not want some dude on a throne with a giant hat saying, this is what everyone has to believe. That's evil. You remember in Revelation 9 with those locusts that came upon the earth? Ones that had power like scorpions? Isn't it weird that they were commanded not to hurt the grass of the earth, nor any green thing, nor any tree? The Greek word for the green thing there, any green thing, is chloros. That's the same as the green priesthood. These guys, the 4th seal, written by death. You know that the Federal Reserve is now saying it's going to green the financial system? The Fed is joining the network of central banks and supervisors for greening the financial system. Obviously, it's just a theory, but I'm starting to think that these satanic institutions are trying to exploit that loophole in Revelation by identifying themselves with green. When it says they can't hurt any green thing, they might actually think they can get around that. Puts a new spin on the green movement. Maybe green aliens tie in. It's a great question. I think it has to do specifically with Israel. And whatever they said, if we had been allowed to know that, if John had written it down, it would change the course of the future. It had to be sealed up or else it couldn't come true. Must have been pretty powerful. Next, we get this interesting event. Jesus and the 144,000 are on Mount Zion. But Jesus also appears in the sky with a sickle to harvest. You see that in verse 14. And an angel comes out of the temple and tells Jesus to harvest and reap. The second angel comes out of the temple and does the same thing. He also reaps with a sharp sickle. So there are 2 harvests. One is by Jesus, and the other is by an angel who puts his people that he harvests into a giant winepress of the wrath of God. Blood comes out. These 2 harvests match with what Jesus said when he gave the parable of the wheat and the tares. Kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. While a man slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. Both are allowed to grow until the harvest. Only at the end do the reapers come to sort them out. One goes into the furnace to be burned. The other goes up to the barn. Or in the next part. The question is all of this in my book? The answer is yes. My book is a complete study of this subject. It explains the 7 sealed book, the kingdom of heaven, the writers, all of the things that we're talking about in these videos. And it's not super long. This is exactly the point we're getting to in the main study that I'm doing. It's all about the wheat and the tares, the real church and the fake church. Parable of the sower that sows the good seed, but his enemy comes by and plants fake seed. Jesus knew that. He preached that. Revelation solves that. Paul said, "For being free from all, I myself became a servant to all, so that I might win the more. To the Jews I became like a Jew, so that I might win the Jews. To those under the law, as under the law. To the weak I became as weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all, so that by all means I might save some." What does it cost me to put a zodiac in my bio? I don't read horoscopes. I don't live according to that. I hate the New Age. But if somebody checks out my bio and they see Scorpio in it, there's a certain percent of the population that thinks that that matters, and they might become attracted to my personality. And yes, I've found that it works. And then what? They watch the videos and they learn about Jesus. They learn about Revelation. Never hear me preaching the zodiac, that's for sure. Jesus gives a parable about tares being sown among wheat. He says that's what the kingdom of heaven is like. Tares is an old word for darnel. It's called wheat's evil twin. It's actually poisonous. You see, darnel isn't just a weed. It actually looks a lot like wheat, to the point where you would get confused. Jesus says he doesn't want to have those tares ripped out because they might uproot the wheat along with them. So this poisonous weed is spreading being planted by Satan throughout the real church. And you don't really know which one is real and which one is fake until it matures to the point where you can actually sample the grain. Then you find out which is poisonous and which one is good for you. Only at the time of the harvest are they going to be properly separated and put in different places. Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant, these are just words. The whole Catholic Church is essentially tares, but there can be good Christians in there. Any church can have darnel in it. There are even well-known paintings about Satan sowing darnel. Revelations 14, we finally see that harvest happen. This harvest in the sky has just happened. The question is, does that happen on earth right away? Or are those two harvests actually describing events that are about to happen on earth? Well, if you remember the golden censer and how that foreshadowed the planet killer meteor and the 7 trumpets, then I would say this definitely seems like foreshadowing, not literal events that are happening on earth with the wine press and the wrath of God. In that case, it would be signaling Armageddon, but it's not actually Armageddon yet. And sure enough, the very next thing that happens is that there's an angel with 7 bowls or vials of the wrath of God. These 7 vials torture people and end up making them gather at the place called Armageddon. So the lesson here is that those 2 harvests lead to Armageddon, but that's not a repetition. One happens in heaven to show spoilers for what's going to happen on earth because it was commanded in heaven, and then we see the events play out on earth that literally lead to the real Armageddon. We're finally up to those 7 vials or bowls of wrath. It starts with painful sores for all of the non-believers, and the sea turns to blood and everything dies in them. Same with the rivers and springs. Then the sun becomes scorching hot and people still don't repent. Then the beast's entire empire is darkened. Then the Euphrates River dries up. Finally, there's an earthquake so huge it actually divides Babylon or Jerusalem into 3 parts. Along the way, there's plenty of commentary by those in heaven saying how righteous these judgments are. But the 6th one actually has quite a bit more to it. We see now the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet, and they each have an unclean spirit they send out into the world. They're called demonic spirits, and they do miracles in front of the kings of the whole world, specifically to assemble them for Armageddon. It's only after that Babylon is split into 3 parts. I'm going to run into that wine press.
Whistleblowers Part 4. Toot toot!
All information dealing with alien or alien reproduced technology or alien reproduced vehicles or any other kinds of things well hidden from the American public. Our black budget, for instance, garners $1.023 trillion every 2 years. It's over $500 billion a year. Right now, there are 131 active deep underground military bases in the United States. There's 1,477 of them worldwide.
If you want to watch the full interview, it's
When I was 13 or 14, my 2 older brothers moved out of the house, and I was alone. And I'd never actually studied the Bible. I had no idea how to study the Bible. I didn't even know what the books were. But one evening, suddenly, I got this strong urge to look up a certain topic. Of all things, it was the Sabbath, and whether it's okay to work on the Sabbath. And for hours, into the night, I just started becoming obsessed with finding all the answers about it. I even somehow figured out how to go to the back and look up the glossary of terms to figure out every time the topic came up. And the next morning, I ran 5 blocks straight to go to my brother's house and to tell them about it. And it turns out that was the topic my brother had been praying about day and night for a week, because he was about to start working on Saturday and Sunday, and he didn't know if that was okay. I literally had sheets of paper with my notes, and I just handed it to him before I knew any of that. Let's explain the 7 vials of wrath from a logical point of view. I explained before that there was a planet killer meteor that explains the 6 trumpets, or at least the first 5. The Euphrates River drying up makes perfect sense because that's where the meteor that lands on the rivers and springs has hit. The beast's empire being darkened also makes sense because the smoke goes up and a third of the sky is blacked out, and these would keep on burning. That massive shower of meteorites and impacts across the atmosphere would burn things up and make it so that the sun would start scorching people because there's no ozone. The sea becoming blood and the rivers and springs also makes sense because the hailfire was bloody and the burning mountain went into the sea and is completely polluting it. and wormwood hit the land in the springs. The painful sores no doubt have something to do with all that toxic smoke and toxicity on their bodies and in the air, and in the drinking water. And as for that giant earthquake, I bet this thing here hits a fault line.
So there's a lot to cover here, but I'm just going to specifically talk on the fact that I think you're misunderstanding Hebrew metaphors. You bring up the mark of the beast, and I think this is a perfect example. Pause and read this if you need to. This is a line in Revelation that is often used out of context. People often see this as a prophecy suggesting that governments will attempt people to get chips in their forehead and in their hands, for example. But this is actually John referencing earlier scripture. In Deuteronomy, before the people of Israel were meant to go into the promised land, God specifically told them, you will wear my word between your forehead and on your hands. Basically saying that you will have my word as the most important thing in your life, and it must be the most important thing in your life. What John is doing is he's drawing a direct correlation between the two and saying that the beast, which is Satan, or evil, will require you to swear allegiance to worldly things, but remember what God said to you, that you should swear allegiance to him and his word. You're just simply not understanding the Hebrew references and the metaphors that are associated with them.
What happens to children in the tribulation? Well, we have to remember what it actually says. First, we have that pale green horse. It's ridden by death, and Hades follows it. We have divine permission to kill 1/4 of the earth with the sword, famine, disease, and the wild animals. I think that reign of the death rider is going to include a more personal tribulation against the church. It specifically says that they were violently killed because of the word of God and because of the testimony they had given. Children just aren't being killed because they have the word of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ. Children don't understand it. They're not going to be putting up a fight against the satanic empire. If you're a Christian and you have kids, I don't know what's going to happen with them. But I do know that Jesus says this: whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it. Whoever loses it because of me will. Let's finally talk about that false prophet. One thing we know for sure is that he only arrives on the biblical scene after the sixth angel pours out his bowl on the river Euphrates, which dries it up and prepares the way for the kings of the east. 3 chapters later, in chapter 19 of Revelations, he's finally captured along with the beast and thrown into the lake of fire, like so. But very little else is said about him. We have to deduce who this is in prophecy. And I, like many others, think it is the man of sin. Because it's only logical that you have to be pretty significant in prophecy in order to get thrown into that lake of fire alongside the beast, only after Armageddon. He's not even killed. He's just thrown in there. Specifically, they're thrown in alive. If you're thrown in the lake of fire forever and you're alive, you're not human anymore. There's a good theory that the beast is actually manifesting physically as a man at this point. And that's why they're tied together completely. Next, we will get into 2 Thessalonians, where it talks about him properly. 2 Thessalonians specifically says that the day of the Lord will not come unless there is a falling away first, that the man of sin be revealed, who is the son of perdition. He opposes and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is even worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple, showing himself that he is God. Whoever it is will be the lawless one that needs to be revealed, and the Lord will destroy him with the breath of his mouth. His arrival will be by Satan's working, and will have all kinds of miracles and signs, just like a false prophet would. Specifically deceive those who have no place in their hearts for the truth, so as to be saved. Consequently, God will send them a deluding influence so that they will believe what is false, and so that all of them who have not believed the truth and delighted in evil will be condemned. We tie this in with the fact that Jesus was already said to be on Mount Zion with the 144,000, presumably where the temple is. We come up with a very interesting conundrum. So here's our conundrum. We already know that Jesus is on Mount Zion with the 144,000. But when the sixth vial is poured out, the man of sin / false prophet gathers the armies of the world with false wonders. Obviously, he's not telling the truth, so he's blaspheming, and he deceives the whole world, or at least the evil armies. Then something happens, and the seventh vial is broken. Jerusalem / Babylon is hit by the biggest earthquake in human history, and it divides the city into 3 parts. We know from Thessalonians that that man of sin has to sit on the throne in the temple and show that he is above all that is called God. Then something else happens, and we know Jesus has to return and destroy him. And something else happens, and the false prophet / beast are cast into the lake of fire alive. What happens in these blank spaces? What happens to the 144,000? What happens to Jesus? They have to be somewhere in there. Jesus going to just let him sit on the throne and show himself that he's above God? The only thing that explains it all is the abomination of desolation. Okay. Jesus brings up the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel. It says that when it's standing in the holy place, which is presumably the temple on Mount Zion, people in Judea should flee, because then there will be great suffering unlike anything that has happened from the beginning of the world until now, or will ever happen. And if those days had not been cut short, no one would be saved. For the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short by the coming of the Son of Man. While they're fleeing, there will be false messiahs and false prophets to appear and do great signs and wonders to deceive them, that they might even deceive the elect. Weirdly, he says wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. So we know for sure this has not happened, because the days were not cut short. Jesus didn't come back flashing like a lightning in the sky. The greatest suffering that has ever happened is not in the past. This is about the 144,000 elect, the man of sin. All right, so for everyone who's arguing about the Sabbath, my comments, let's actually read what it says about the Sabbath. I love the Sabbath as much as anyone. Let's see, Exodus 31:15. Whosoever doeth any work in the Sabbath day, he shall surely be put to death. Did you catch that part about being put to death? Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations for a perpetual covenant. Are you from the tribes of Israel by any chance? Are you living under the Moses law? This is written in Exodus. If you're not fulfilling every part of the law, you are disobeying the law. You are guilty. In order to be forgiven under the law, you have to get the high priest to do sacrifices in the temple. Are you able to do that somehow? Jesus is the last sacrifice. He is our high priest. He is the temple. He is everything. He is the Sabbath. Moses shows up with Jesus and says, hey, this is the guy. Gives us the Holy Spirit. Tells you the law is loving your neighbor, not this. You know, we've got a lot of smart Christians out here on TikTok. Let me ask you something, though. What would it take for Satan to be able to break your faith? What would happen if you saw aliens, not on the news, but with your own eyes? What would happen if you saw Israel say that they found their Messiah, and everyone's convinced that's the Antichrist? Well, we better start our timeline, our 7-year timeline. We know it's got to be 7 years, right? 7 years of tribulation, and that's it. Maybe 3.5 years. Oh, but if the rapture doesn't happen when you think it has to happen by Scripture, well then boom, there goes your faith. And then they come for you. Are you going to say God abandoned us, the Bible was a lie? What if they come to kill you in the name of Jesus? And they've got miracles, and you don't. You know Satan is the king of lies, but all these Christians are so convinced they're not even going to be fooled at all. Satan can use your dogma against you. What would it take for them to break your faith? Because there is nothing they can do to break mine. What is the abomination of desolation? Some people said it happened a long time ago. Jesus says that the abomination of desolation is going to be followed by the greatest period of tribulation in human history, and it will only be cut short by his coming down like lightning. So those people are wrong. It hasn't happened yet. So what is it? The man of sin, right? The man of sin somehow ends up on that throne in the temple. But if you're like most Christians, you don't believe that's going to be a convincing story at all. Yeah, he's going to do some fake miracles. He's going to fool some people. God's going to send a delusion to allow people to believe it. But it's not actually going to be convincing, is it? I mean, you would never believe it, would you? I mean, we know everything already, right? We know what's going to happen. You listened to your preacher on Sunday and he told you about it. So me and you, we're immune to that deception. It's not like he's actually going to accomplish something that would challenge our beliefs. It's not like he's going to appear to defeat Jesus somehow. I mean, that would just, that's not supported. That's nowhere in the Bible. It's going to change the Sabbath or something, right? Do you know a Christian who matches this description? Jesus says there will be some who are sown on rocky ground. As soon as they hear the word, they receive it with joy. But they have no root in themselves and do not endure. Then, when trouble or persecution comes, because of the word, immediately they fall away. Would that Christian be you? How much persecution are you willing to endure for the word of God? How deep are the roots of your faith? This warning is not about other people. This warning is about you. I believe we are entering a time of tribulation like never before, and there is going to be a great falling away because people are shallow. If you love your family, if you love your fellow Christians, Get them to deepen those roots. Tell them, we will die for Christ. We will take up our cross. We will fight any deception they throw at us, and we will go down swinging, not with violence, but with the word of God. I'm sure you know the Sermon on the Mount, right? Everyone remembers that Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, blessed are the merciful. Why does nobody go to the end and read this part? Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and say all kinds of evil things about you falsely on account of me. And then here's the real kicker. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. So they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Do you have any idea what this means? I have been reviled. I have been falsely accused. And I don't think it's going to take very long before I'm suffering persecution. Not because I'm special, but because I have the testimony of Christ. And do you want to know how I feel about it? I am exceedingly glad. I get excited every time someone insults me because I'm a Christian. All you can do is bless me. Do you realize that? Satan can do nothing except bless me. You know, I found a book that's worth $1,000, and you can get it for $55. It's called The Martyr's Mirror, the story of 17 centuries of Christian martyrdom from the time of Christ until 1660. If you want to weep and have your life changed, you read this. Daniel 9, we read about the 70 weeks. These are concerning Daniel's people, the Israelites, and their holy city, Jerusalem. A lot of very important things have to happen during that time, including the establishment of perpetual righteousness. That right there already tells you that we're talking about the end of the age and the establishment of the millennial kingdom afterwards. In this period, God is going to put an end to the rebellion of people on earth, going to allow sin to complete itself, and Jerusalem is going to have to atone for all of its iniquity. Remember that John already said that Jerusalem is spiritually called Sodom and Egypt. You can go to Revelations 11:8 for that. Okay, so there's a command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. This rebuilding will happen, but in distressful times. Jerusalem's going to have to be rebuilt because it's hit by the biggest earthquake in history and divided into 3 parts. This will allow the prince to come in and destroy them. That prince is going to be the man of sin, who's going to confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. So Jerusalem is being rebuilt and restored after this giant earthquake that divides it. Happens during a very troublesome time. And after that time, the Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. So we have to ask, what does it mean to be cut off? And why is it not for himself? Well, back in Isaiah, cut off means being killed. The Hebrew word for cut off is karath. It means both cut off and cut down. You can do your own research on the term, but in general, it really does mean to destroy, to cut down, and to kill. There is no way to be cut off in a good way. If we're talking about Jesus, then we know it's not because of his own lack of power. He's not actually defeated. So that would be maybe why it's not for himself. Not that he lacks anything. The man of sin doesn't actually kill him. It could be why in 2 Thessalonians, Paul says that God will cause them a strong delusion so that they will believe a lie. Know that he has satanic powers of lying wonders. This theory would mean God once again tricks Satan into thinking he's won. The number one reason why Jews reject Jesus is because he was killed. We know that even from the Bible story of Jesus, that they wanted him to establish his kingdom on earth right away. He didn't match their notion of what the Messiah should be. And they obviously didn't listen to that part in Isaiah that said he has to be cut off from the land of the living. Our faith is based on the idea that Jesus came and knew that he would have to die. But that didn't stop it from being the most shocking thing imaginable to people who were there, and no one would have believed it beforehand. Satan didn't even know it. 1 Corinthians 2. None of the rulers of this age has understood, for if they had understood, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. If God pulls the same trick twice, it will be as controversial now for us to believe as it would have been for a Jew to believe it before Jesus came and died on the cross. Even though we have the prophecy, when you incorporate the great delusion God's going to send, it becomes even more convincing. If you've been following along with my videos so far, this is the perfect question to be asking. I believe Satan does know all of this, and there is an explanation for why he still thinks he can win. And I think I can guarantee that you've never heard this explanation before. Somebody asked, why doesn't Satan realize all of this? Doesn't he have the Bible? Every Christian I've ever talked to says he's just proud. He doesn't realize how futile his own plan is. These people don't understand how Satan works or how God's promises work. You see, Satan is a lawyer. That's why he always thrives where the law is strong. By the time Jesus arrived, you have the Pharisees. That's why Jesus simplified everything, boiled the law down to the basics, and gave us the Holy Spirit, because Satan can't corrupt something that's that simple and undefined. So fine, he doesn't have the law, but there are still promises in God's Word. And as we know, every promise that God makes cannot be broken. So the only way for Satan to win is to use God's own promises against him. And once you know which promises he's trying to fulfill, you'll see the entire world differently. Satan is a lawyer, and he wants to use God's own promises to defeat him. We can talk about what defeating God would even mean in a different video. Let's go look at a very well-known example in Jeremiah 31 of God's promise. Behold, the days come, says the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers, which covenant of mine they broke, although I was a husband to them. But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel. After those days I will put my law in their inward parts, and write it in their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And then you can read the rest of this. I will forgive their iniquity, I will remember their sins no more. The promise is so strong, he reinforces it by saying that if the sun and moon don't continue the way that they were, if those ordinances depart from me, says the Lord, the seed of Israel shall also cease from being a nation before me forever. Did you just catch that promise he made right there? Because Satan noticed it. God has made a promise that if the ordinances of the sun and moon depart from him, the seed of Israel will cease from being a nation before him forever. Now, obviously, most Christians would read that and say, that's a promise that he's never going to abandon Israel. This is an example of a promise that Satan could theoretically take advantage of. How would he do that? Well, according to the book of Enoch and some other traditions, the reason why stars and angels are often interchanged in the Bible is because the ordinances of the stars are angels. So if Satan could get those angels to stop obeying God, he could actually theoretically break the covenant with Israel. This is the mind of Satan. And we do see that the sun, moon, and stars are darkened in the fourth trumpet. Now, I believe there's a logical explanation for that would not involve those stars disobeying God. But the biggest legal loophole he's trying to take advantage of is right afterwards. What we're about to read is the reason that Satan thinks he can beat Jesus on the day of Armageddon. Jeremiah 31:37 says, "Thus says the Lord, if the heavens above can be measured, and the foundations of the earth below can be searched out, I will also cast off all the seed of Israel for all that they have done." Measuring the heavens and searching out the earth below. Who runs NASA? Who's making contact with aliens? You know, aliens. And these aliens have information about outer space, you say? Or maybe the earth is hollow, and so they come down from the foundations of the world. You know, with that crazy flat earth theory, and that giant hole in Antarctica. Until you know about the Jeremiah 31:37 loophole, all of this seems unconnected. Why is the Galactic Federation of Aliens working with US and Israel? Is there something about measuring the heavens that ties in with Israel? Our study of this subject is just getting started. I'm glad you guys enjoyed this exercise of going through the 7 seals, trumpets, and vials. The meteor impact, the great angel, the 144,000, heavenly history lesson, the Catholic and Orthodox beast, the mark of the beast. We're going to wipe it off and learn new things. Okay, so as we get into the topic of satanic deception, I'd like to discuss the Green World Order, specifically in the context of that Jeremiah 31:37 loophole that Satan thinks he can take advantage of. There are 4 main aspects to discuss. One is measuring the heavens, one is searching out the foundation, another is that death empire, and another is the new powers. I don't mind jumping into any of these, but if you guys want to comment on which one you're the most interested in, please let me know. This is a question about the 7 lampstands and the 7 stars. Everyone knows that in Revelation 2 and 3, Jesus gives messages to the churches, but they don't pay attention to the fact that these are directed to the angel of that church. When John sees Jesus, he's in the midst of 7 lampstands, and in his right hand he has 7 stars. He explains to John that the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches themselves. This clearly distinguishes the churches from the angels. When Jesus talks to the angel of the church in a place, that is a special message for an angel. Obviously, humans were intended to read it too. And at the end of each one, it says, "Let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. So one of the messages is specifically from Jesus to the angels, and then the other one has a message to the churches from the Spirit. First example, Jesus says he walks in the midst of the lampstands and he holds the 7 stars. That literally means Jesus walks among the churches, plural. This message is for all of the Christians who believe the lie, the satanic lie, that the world now has the power to sever your connection to God with technology, with ingredients in a syringe, with microchips in nanomachines. Do you realize that all that crap about your pineal gland is just New Age mysticism, repackaged old Eastern beliefs? It's your third eye. It's the same gimmick. They want you to believe they have that power. Because what happens when you believe that your connection with God is lost? If you believe you're lost, you are lost. They want you afraid. They have no technology except the technology to send themselves to hell. They will kill you if you don't go along with whatever plans they have, but we should be rejoicing when they do that. Go ahead and reject everything, but do not believe that they have that power. You believe God is that weak? That the blood of Christ is that weak?
Look, at this point, everybody knows what the Israeli official said about the Galactic Federation, so I'm not going to get too much into that. I am, however, going to focus on why this is happening right now. Is it possible that Earth is actually on the verge of being entered into the Galactic Federation, but the rest of the aliens were a little sketchy for obvious reasons? So the elite humans of Earth had to lock everything down this year, make sure we were on our best behavior, and now they're trying to prove that we can handle the information by slowly telling us. They're looking at the other aliens like, see bro, the humans could take it, they didn't even care. Next, they're going to tell us we've known about the Galactic Federation for 100 years, but they didn't accept us until very recently. Oh, and for what it's worth, I told y'all this year was going to end.
Okay, so the first part of the Green World Order we're going to be discussing is measuring the heavens. We know from the Jeremiah 31:37 loophole that if mankind can measure the heavens and search out the foundations of the earth, God has no choice but to cast off the seed of Israel for all that they have done. Of course, we know from Genesis 1 that God created the lights in the heavens for signs and for appointed seasons and for days and years. This is why ancient civilizations were obsessed with astrology. In Matthew 2, we see that there are wise men, which literally is the word magi, or wizards or magicians, who managed to come all the way to Jesus' birthplace because they followed his star. And they even come to worship him. So this is no joke. The Bible confirms that this is real. We're not supposed to live according to astrology, but those who practice it do have some sort of insight or power according to the Bible. As we study this, keep that in mind. We're supposed to live by the word and by faith, but there are secrets in heaven. So measuring the heavens could have big implications. Just as I believe that Satan has a lawyer's mindset to try to look for loopholes to defeat God, I also believe that God created those loopholes for Satan to try to exploit. So when God made the Jeremiah 31:37 loophole, where measuring the heavens and the earth means God has to cast off the seed of Israel, I believe God was trying to get Satan and his followers to start measuring the heavens and the earth as much as they could within their power. Think about it. There's no reason whatsoever why God has to put conditions and loopholes on his promises. He could just say, I am going to do this, and that's it. But then he goes out of his way to say, if you can do this, then my promises will change. Why would you do that? Maybe God knows that the pursuit of that knowledge is going to lead to the fulfillment of his own prophecies. We need to look at our world and our history and our current day as byproducts of Satan's conspiracy to try to fulfill these things. Now let's go back to Los Alumbrados and the Jesuits. You might remember me saying that the Jesuits are the Black Rider. That's the third rider, the third seal broken in Revelations. But I didn't examine what it actually says about that rider. As you'll see in most Bible commentaries, they'll claim it's about famine. Here's what it actually says. There's a black horse, and the one sitting on it has a pair of scales in his hand. The Greek word is zygon, and it refers to a balance. Balance is referring to this, for measuring. You know, measuring. Then there's a voice that talks about the price of certain types of commodities, namely wheat and barley, and it commands people to not hurt the oil and the wine. There's nothing even remotely close to discussing famine here. What it's talking about is the ability to measure things and then control them, i.e. science, food supply, and the economy. The color black represents secrecy, the occult, talking about occult scientific elites. Satan has a loophole that, if he could pull it off, would allow him to defeat Jesus on the day of Armageddon. But in order to pull that off, he would have to be able to measure the heavens and search out the foundations of the earth. How hard could that be? There are two fields of science dedicated to those exact things. One of them is astronomy. The other is geology. Now, wouldn't it be absolutely crazy if there was some Roman Catholic order who was obsessed with those two exact things? Wouldn't it be even crazier if they wore black, like the Black Rider who has the scales to measure? Well, if we go to the Jesuits' official website, they say that by 1750, Jesuit astronomers ran 30 of the world's 130 astronomical observatories. And up to 35 lunar craters have been named to honor Jesuit scientists. Their measurements of the heavens led to our current day calendar. You know, the most widely used calendar in the world. But they can't also be geologists, right? Seismology is a branch of geophysics. It studies the composition and state of the planet's interior. So out of all the branches of geology or geophysics, seismology is the one that's especially concerned about the foundations of the earth. Now look what we have here. An article on the Seismological Society of America. It says that from the very early years of its foundation in the 16th century, the Society of Jesus dedicated itself primarily through educational work through its colleges and universities. From the beginning, science was an important subject. It also recognizes their astronomical observatories. Since the middle of the 19th century, as many as 40 geographical observatories were created by the Jesuits around the world, and many of these seismological stations were installed. So not only is the Black Rider, the Jesuits, obsessed with the sky and measuring the heavens, they are also obsessed with seismology and the underground. Wikipedia says seismology is the Jesuit science. All about that loophole. The Green World Order is all about collapsing our current civilization and replacing it with an empire of death, superstition, super technology, and new discoveries that wipe away everything that's old. I don't think it's going to last very long, because once they kill the church, God's going to start terrorizing the world. But they're going to think that they have that satanic loophole that lets them escape that judgment. This green priesthood thinks it can escape because the locusts can't hurt any green thing. But what this means is that the Black Rider, the Jesuit world order, needs to collapse in order to usher in that green priesthood. The Jesuit world order is all about science, the economy, and intelligence gathering. But the green priesthood would replace that with miraculous technology, sort of communist utopian world economy, and a world federation with demons. So the age of the Enlightenment disappears, which you might think is good if you're a Christian, but it actually gets replaced with a satanic New Age spirituality. That's the Green World Order. A lot of you probably know about the incredible work of Michael S. Heiser and his book, The Unseen Realm. Did you know that he's been warning about the New Age as well? He talks about the connection between New Age, fallen angels, extraterrestrials, and the Nephilim. This guy is not a random quack. You might also be interested in the fact that he created some science fiction. The Facade Saga, with 2 volumes so far. It deals with ancient tombs, forgotten Nazi experiments, UFOs, occult mythologies, biblical theology, and godlike technology. I actually read the first book, and do you know what I found interesting? In his depiction of the above top secret level conspiracy between aliens and mankind, the most powerful, knowledgeable character is a Jesuit. And he shows off in there that the Jesuits have astronomical observatories that allow them some sort of insight into how this is all fitting together. I made my theories before I even knew about his book. I think the first version of the original book was written around 2012 or something. I'm not the only one connecting these dots. This is a perfect question. How does Satan know when he's measured the heavens? Or for that matter, searched out the foundations of the earth? This is something I talk about in my book. Because even if man did somehow measure the heavens, they wouldn't even know that they'd done it correctly until Armageddon. It's not like God is just going to come down from heaven and say, hey guys, you did it, you figured it out. No, the Jeremiah 31:37 loophole is the proof that they did it, right? So it comes down to whether or not Israel is going to be saved by God in that final conflict, which is why I keep bringing it back to the man of sin and his ability to sit on that throne, while Jesus was already there. That's why I think the Abomination of Desolation is the trick that God is going to play on Satan to make him think that he won, and he did successfully fulfill that loophole. I mean, I don't know, but this is what's going through my head. More in the next part. Trying to explain how big the universe is has plagued scientists for hundreds of years. The idea of light speed and light years, the idea of, the expanding universe, so that the universe doesn't have a set size that you could ever measure. It keeps going at pretty much light speed itself. This leads to the necessity for a fundamental formula of everything that would allow you to extrapolate the future and past of the universe in order to say how big it was or is or could be at any given time. So things like dark matter, relativity. Scientists sure are trying to figure it out. The velocity of remote galaxies is easy to measure, or so we thought. Frankly, I find it very funny to see teams of the smartest people in the world trying desperately to solve a mystery God put in front of them. They need aliens. So we're talking about the God formula. Of course, we're also talking about NASA, UFOs, NASA as a derivative of Operation Paperclip and the importation of all these Nazi scientists from Nazi Germany. Crazy experiments they were apparently doing in the Antarctic, which ties in with the flat earthers. The idea is that if you could get off-world entities, demons, aliens, whatever, to help you figure out the Jeremiah 31:37 loophole and measure the heavens and the foundations of the earth, might need to end up with something like a God formula that would allow mankind to do miracles and access the quantum realm. So when our current materialistic world order falls and the green world order comes into being, the closer they get to figuring this out, the more powers they might have. Some people say that's what the quantum computing thing already is. It's sort of a preview of what's to come. What does this have to do with Jesus saying it'll be like the days of Noah? When Bill Gates wants to darken the sun, he wants to do it by spraying the atmosphere with chemicals. And what have we learned already? We learned that they're trying to fulfill prophecy under the name of the Green Movement. Thus says the Lord, who gives the sun for a light by day. If those ordinances depart from before me, says the Lord, then the seed of Israel shall also cease from being a nation before me forever. Now, Bill Gates is just some guy that got chosen to be in charge of all of this. The real orchestrators of this are far away and you never see them. What his job is to come out in public and make it seem like he's some wacky, quirky billionaire who has these crazy plans to save the environment and join the Green Movement. But the hardcore Satanists who hate Israel so much, they want to fulfill this prophecy in Jeremiah. They're the ones behind the whole green priesthood, the whole green movement. It doesn't matter that climatologists say it's disastrous and stupid, because they want death. The Green Rider brings in death. The Vatican celebrates the Big Bang? Yep, they sure do. Oh, because it was a Jesuit cosmologist who came up with the whole thing. That was back in 1927. Luke 17, Jesus says that it will be like the days of Noah when he returns. Now, I know it's pretty obvious from the way he uses it that he's talking about the fact that people are just going to carry on like normal and not heed the warnings that are in the scriptures. Especially because he also uses the example of Lot, Sodom and Gomorrah. But that doesn't mean it can't have more implications to it. 1 Timothy says, the Spirit expressly states that in the last days people are going to listen to demons, specifically forbidding to marry, abstaining from certain foods. In the days of Noah, we know that angels came down and fornicated with women, producing giants. In the book of Enoch, they teach them secrets from the angels as well. So you'd have doctrines of these fallen angels, at least. Perhaps more importantly, in Revelation 9, we see that people will worship demons by the time the sixth trumpet happens. You can look up Michael Heiser, you can look up the Nephilim, the Watchers. There's a lot of good thinking on this out there. Beware the new age.
STEM majors, let's go around the room and tell everybody something we understand but absolutely refuse.
I'm about to blow your mind. The outer core, inner core, and mantle of the Earth is a hypothesis. I've spoken to my geology professor about this. The entire concept is a hypothesis. We don't actually know. We assume that the mantle is 80% magnesium because we take samples from volcanoes and things like that. We assume that there's a liquid outer core because S waves, which can't pass through a liquid, are bouncing off somewhere random within the middle of the Earth instead of passing right through. And we assume that the outer core and the inner core is mostly iron because of the magnetic polarity of the Earth. But did you know that scientists have actually tried numerous times to dig through the crust into the mantle to find actual evidence that it exists, but we can't get there because the pressure is too much? So scientists just take these little bits and pieces of fact, put it together to form a hypothesis that we teach as fact.
Mankind has yet to measure the heavens or search out the foundations of the earth. They haven't done either. But their discoveries have led to amazing things. And I think the biggest discovery of all may be the deadline itself. Have you noticed that 2030 is this new deadline for everything that the satanic conspiracy wants to do? UN Agenda 2030. The official United Nations Twitter account says we have 10 years to go green with generation restoration. They're telling us that everyone's going to die by 2030. So we have death, the green movement, and 2030 all very deeply connected. And by promoting the idea that there are just extinction events at every corner and that we need to quickly do something and unite the whole world like the Tower of Babel, then when people actually are being killed, they can say, see, we warned you. It's not that they're saying they're responsible. But what is the 2030 deadline about? How about a giant meteor that could destroy humanity in 2030? The golden censor. You've heard the phrase salt of the earth, right? Oh, those people from Ohio, they're real salt of the earth people. You may even know that that actually comes from Jesus. Matthew 5:13, you are the salt of the earth. Have you ever actually read what it says afterwards? But if salt loses its flavor, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled on by people. It took a real dark turn there. Because this is actually a warning to Christians. We are supposed to be salty. And what does that mean? Well, salt itself doesn't really have a flavor, but it brings out the flavor in things that are otherwise bland. How many times have you heard someone say the Bible is boring, God's word is boring or bland? I think that we're not only the salt of the earth in the sense that we are supposed to make the world more interesting with our belief in our Christianity. We're especially supposed to do that by making the Bible more interesting and palatable to the average person. If we don't, we are worthless. So hopefully by now you understand why Satan thinks he can win against Jesus and why he hasn't fulfilled what he needs to yet in order to do that. Because we're going to go back into the main prophecy of Revelation and get into the fate of the 144,000 in Jerusalem. The last thing we saw was that the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet sent actual demons out to do miracles for the kings of the earth, specifically for the battle that will take place on the great day of the God Almighty, to a place called Armageddon in Hebrew. The valley is a tourist attraction, and saying that it will be the final battle place with Jesus Christ leading the forces of light. I think it's today called the Jezreel Valley. So anyway, that's where they gather. And it's only once they're gathered that the seventh vial is poured out, and God says it is done. Like so. Now this is actually an important point. God says it is done before the actual events happen on earth. Something I've been trying to emphasize in this series. Something is declared in heaven, and it is considered to be already done on earth, because nothing on earth can change what God says. Because unlike us, they know that this is guaranteed now. So it's go time. The next chapter, we get a nice big description of what Jerusalem was doing before Jesus converted it. The first thing you need to know about the whore of Babylon is actually said at the end of the chapter. The woman you saw is the great city that has sovereignty over the kings of the earth. Likewise, it clarifies that the waters that she sits on are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. Obviously, in our theory here, this is a future Jerusalem who has become the capital of the New World Order. The kings of the earth commit sexual immorality with her, and the earth's inhabitants get drunk off of the wine of that fornication. So whatever the alliances are that this future Jerusalem makes, they're going to result in the whole world getting drunk, meaning, losing their morality, off of the byproducts of whatever this alliance is. It's actually a pretty straightforward metaphor once you know it's a city and it's supposed to be Jerusalem, who's supposed to be pure and virgin. As the description goes on, it gets a lot darker and more specific. This is why Satan really wants to control Israel today. The whore of Babylon is said to sit on a scarlet beast, full of blasphemy, and it has 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, just barely in the last part, we heard that she was sitting on many waters. So how can she be sitting on many waters and yet sitting on the beast at the same time? It actually makes perfect sense when you realize that the beast itself is an empire, specifically the Roman Empire, the Catholic Church, the Orthodox, and the image of the beast, which is our modern secular Renaissance society. This one is scarlet, so it's even more like the dragon The similarities between the dragon and the beast are not a coincidence. 7 heads, 10 horns, now it's also red. So Jerusalem is teamed up with Rome to rule the world. Jerusalem has the power, has sovereignty over it, and the beast does its work. There's a deal with the devil going on. It's no wonder that this whole chapter is about condemning this situation. But we've been getting hints about this already. So we've got a perfectly consistent description going on of this great city that John talked about a long time ago already, where the Lord was crucified, if you remember that. It was called spiritually Sodom and Egypt. Then it was called Babylon. Now we're seeing a really full description of it. But what does it actually do? What is it like? She has a golden cup filled with detestable things and unclean things from her fornication. And on her forehead is written a name, a mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and the detestable things of the earth. What is she getting drunk on all the time? How about the blood of the saints and the blood of those who testified to Jesus? So this future satanic city is getting drunk on our blood. We die for Jesus, and then it celebrates that and takes that as some sort of great satisfaction that it's getting drunk off of. I know it sounds really dark, but we actually get blessed when we get killed by this thing. Don't tell them. If you believe truly that the mark of the beast is a piece of technology, a quantum dot tattoo, injection, something like that, and if it gets mandated by the government and it's tied in with an economy where you can't buy or sell without it, does that mean that you also give up on the eternal souls of everybody who has it? Think about it. Think about what it really means to have the mark of the beast. If you believe that everybody who gets it is going to hell forever, which is what it says the mark of the beast does that mean you're not going to preach to those people because the blood of Christ can't save them? What if secret agents pulled up in a van like, an episode of the X-Files and just gave this thing to you? Does all of your faith mean nothing? You go to hell now? Is it really technology? Either Jesus Christ can save every person's soul or he can't. Either you are supposed to have faith or you're not. I think they want us to believe it is the mark. Does that mean you should take it? No, it's evil. An angel tells John that he's going to explain the beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns that carries the whore of Babylon. In one of the most confusing riddles in the Bible, it says that the beast you saw was and is not, but is about to come up from the abyss and then go to destruction. And all those whose names are not written in the book of life will be astounded when they see it. The 7 heads of the beast are 7 mountains that the woman sits on. Now again, this isn't that confusing. The woman is future Jerusalem. She sits on many waters and on the beast, and now we're seeing that she sits on the 7 heads of the beast. And those 7 heads are 7 mountains. Everyone knows that Rome is the city on 7 hills. If you accept that, which a lot of you do, then you should also accept that this is just confirming what we've already said. Many waters are many peoples. The beast is Rome. The beast has 7 heads, which are 7 mountains, which is also Rome. It's all about future Jerusalem and this Roman world empire. I've been telling you about that green priesthood, right? How about the green Sabbath? Sunday lockdowns for Gaia and Jubilee for the earth. Climate alarmists from the Pope to rabbis to Greta are calling for a Sunday green Sabbath. It ties in with Agenda 2030. I highly recommend following Ice Age Farmer. I knew we were missing something. So here's a diagram. We've got the Roman Empire, the beast system, and on top of it, the horror. Some people get these two confused, but it's very important to keep them separate. Jerusalem is supposed to be the holy city of God, of course, and it's where Jesus came back to. But it's riding the beast. It is carried by the beast. And the beast, we know, has the power to overcome the saints, and it killed the 2 witnesses. And Babylon is drinking that blood and getting drunk on it. It doesn't actually kill the saints itself. It lets the beast do that and just drinks the blood. We already know the history of the beast from the earlier chapters, the heavenly history lesson. But now we see confirmed that it's sitting on 7 hills and that it also represents many nations and peoples. It's many waters. So there's no point in pretending that the beast is an antichrist. It's an empire. And this bride of Christ has been corrupted and needs to be judged. This is a perfectly good question. I did forget to follow up on the incense part of the golden censer. So in temple ceremonies, incense is meant to be burned to produce a big smoke that fills up the area and has a pleasant smell to it. And this golden censer is filled up with the incense of the prayers of the saints who are martyred and killed on earth. Then the angel takes a bunch of fire from God's altar and puts it in that censer and then throws that to earth. And that comes down to earth and fills up the whole sky with so much smoke that it blocks out 1/3 of the sky. It's such a hardcore, amazing metaphor, such amazing imagery, a spiritual event that encapsulates so much and then manifests physically as an actual cataclysm on earth for all the world to witness. And that incense is going to be holy and pleasant to God, just like it would be in the temple. It's crucial to understanding Revelation. What does it mean that the beast was and is not, but is about to come up out of the abyss and go to destruction? We see that in Revelation 17:8. Well, it says the inhabitants of the earth whose names are not written in the book of life will be astounded when they see the beast that was and is not but is to come. It even specifies that it requires a mind that has wisdom to understand. Well, let's take into consideration that 90% of the world believes that the Catholic Church is the true representative of Christianity on earth. And they would be astounded if they found out that that was actually the Satanic Church the whole time. And as for was and is not, well, that's constantly the description of Rome that we're seeing. Rome was in ancient times, before it was even an empire, but it is not. It's always falling, it's always being revived, and it's always about to go to destruction too, especially at this end time. There's no empire in the world that has died and been reborn as much as Rome. That's astounding. So just as a reminder, we have the dead church at the same time that went up to heaven, where the golden censer was thrown down from. Then we've got 1/3 of the world that just died from the disasters of that golden censer. But there's also this remainder. They're not part of the beast, they're not the mother of harlots, they're just this group that exists outside of either. We know that the gospel was preached to the whole world by the angels, and that they were warned not to worship the beast or take its mark. But they are said to be drunk on the fornication of these two, the beast and the harlot. So the world is bigger than just the beast and Jerusalem. This is why the angel says, "Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from this point forward." So there are going to be people who are watching from the sidelines as part of this remainder who are like, man, that's really evil, and they're going to get killed for that faith as well. It's not our current church, but they are believers and they probably are killed. They can choose a side during this time. In Revelation 17:11, we find out about the fact that the beast becomes the 8th king that is part of the beast system itself. So that's kind of weird. I believe it's the man of sin and also the false prophet. He's going to end up sitting on the throne in the temple, and he's going to lead 10 kingdoms against Jesus in Jerusalem. This would be leading up to the Abomination of Desolation. The beast has 10 horns that are 10 kings who have not received a kingdom but will receive ruling authority as kings for 1 hour. And here's where it all comes together. These 10 kings have a single intent. They give their power and authority to the beast, and together they will make war with the Lamb, with Jesus, but the Lamb will conquer them because he is Lord of Lords and King of Kings, and those accompanying the Lamb are called, chosen, and faithful. So they accomplish the Abomination of Desolation and think that they've successfully killed Jesus, but he's going to come back with the saints and get their revenge and conquer them. The day of the Lord. Revelation 18 describes Babylon being destroyed and judged, and it specifically tells God's people to come out of her because God has remembered her crimes. So at this future point, God's people are still in Babylon if they have to come out of her. And her crimes are remembered, so this is going back a ways with God. This future Jerusalem says, "I rule as a queen and am no widow. I will never experience grief." Not being a widow, huh? You think that might have something to do with the fact that Jerusalem was betrothed to Jesus Christ? Jerusalem is the rightful bride of Christ? I don't think God likes it that she's saying she's not a widow because she rejected Jesus. And if you're saying to yourself, Jerusalem is not that rich and important, this description is way overboard. No, we're talking about the future Jerusalem after the church is dead, as the capital of the New World Order. And if you still don't think it's Jerusalem, the blood of the saints and prophets was found in her. So what happens next is the marriage supper. Jesus comes down out of heaven on his horse with an army of saints. And all of the quote-unquote birds are gathered for the marriage supper. I believe this is the rapture with the 144,000 being gathered and transformed. So these birds and Jesus come down to do war with the beast king, the false prophet, the man of sin, who's at Jerusalem. But the word marriage supper is very interesting. If it's a marriage supper, who's getting married? Well, Jesus is getting married to Jerusalem/the church. And to inaugurate that marriage, they're going to have a giant feast on all of the flesh of these evil kings and rulers in opposition against Jesus. It's a metaphor for the war, the slaughter that's going to happen against all these evil people. And afterwards will be married in the sense that Jesus will establish his kingdom on earth in Jerusalem. This is also the first resurrection at the same time. After the day of the Lord, which is also the marriage supper, Jesus and us and the 144,000 wipe out all these powerful evil people on earth. And this false prophet, this beast king, the man of sin, he gets thrown into the lake of fire. And that's an eternal damnation. But Satan is only put in the bottomless pit, in the abyss, for 1,000 years. During that 1,000 years, we, with Jesus and the 144,000, will be in Jerusalem, in Zion. Most people don't realize this, but heaven is not an eternal resting place. Everybody who's in heaven wants to come back down to earth with Jesus. This earth is where we're going to be reigning for 1,000 years. Because there's still that remainder on earth who can come to Zion and learn from the Lord. Heaven is a temporary resting place until the day of the Lord. They're all excited about what's happening right now on earth because they want that, and we should too. Fantastic question. What happens after the 1,000-year reign on earth? So in Revelation 20, we see that an angel comes down and seizes the serpent who is called the devil and Satan, and he ties him up for 1,000 years. Then he throws him into the abyss and locks it and seals it so that he can't deceive the nations for that 1,000 years. But it already says that after those things, he must be released for a brief period of time. Then it explains the nature of the kingdom and the fact that those who did not worship the beast are going to reign with Jesus. Now when the 1,000 years are finished, Satan will be released from his prison. That's when he will go out to deceive the nations one last time, and Gog and Magog to bring them together for the battle. Specifically, he's going to bring back everybody who's resurrected in the second resurrection. The second resurrection happens after the 1,000 years, and it's all of the unsaved people. Then it's pretty straightforward. They will go up in a broad plain and encircle the camp of the saints in the beloved city, but fire will come down from heaven and devour them. That's it. After the 1,000 years that we reign with Jesus, the devil is thrown into the lake of fire where the beast and the false prophet are. They're tormented there day and night forever and ever. This gives the green light for Judgment Day. A large white throne appears, and heaven and earth flee away. The dead, both great and small, stand before that throne. The dead are judged according to some books, including the book of life, but it also says they're judged according to their deeds. Death and Hades give up all of their dead, but then death and Hades, which are now empty, are thrown into the lake of fire, and this is the second death. And if anyone's name is not found written in the book of life, that person was thrown into the lake of fire. Chapter 16 of my book talks about Judgment Day. Chapter 15 deals with the kingdom come, the millennial kingdom, and then we get to the new creation. And new creation is not what people think it is. There's not a lot of text on this stuff, but it's super interesting to study. Keep an open mind. Millennial kingdom, Judgment Day, new creation, these things need to be discussed so much more. And I just want to get through the text here so that we can focus on them more specifically yet. And no, I didn't forget about that green world order chart that I was going to go through either. We have a lot to discuss still. God very clearly states that he is making all things new. He says that those who conquer will inherit this, and he will be our God. Then he gives a list of people who are excluded, including cowards, unbelievers, detestable people, murderers, sexually immoral, those who practice magic spells, idol worshippers, those who lie. Their place will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. Then we get a fancy and full description of the city of New Jerusalem that comes down out of heaven. Only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life will go there. That's what's eternal, not heaven. New Jerusalem. One of the most powerful statements in Revelation is never even paid attention to. In the very last chapter, John is talking to the angel who has been showing him everything. This angel says clearly, the evildoer must continue to do evil. And the one who is morally filthy must continue to be filthy. The one who is righteous must continue to act righteously. And the one who is holy must continue to be holy. This is doctrine for us to live by. It is not our job to try to change the world into a paradise. The whole idea that we change this world into the kingdom of heaven through our evangelism is wrong. The evil must continue to be evil. It must, according to the Bible. That is a prophetic requirement. Don't try to do impossible things. Continue to be righteous, continue to be holy, but do not try to turn this evil satanic world upside down and somehow make it holy. God judges it, and then we get new creation.